They shattered my heart, but my revenge made them cry for mercy. I used to believe that family was forever, that blood meant loyalty, and that no matter what happened, those closest to you would never be the ones to twist the knife in your back. I was wrong, so painfully wrong, and I learned that lesson in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. My name is Daniel. I grew up in a small but tight-knit neighborhood, where everybody knew everybody, and every Sunday was spent with my parents, my sister Olivia, and my cousin Ethan. We were inseparable as kids, sharing everything from birthday parties to family camping trips, and even our deepest secrets under the stars. If someone had told me back then that these same people would one day betray me, I would have laughed in disbelief. It all started 2 years ago, when my father passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind a modest inheritance and an old house filled with memories. My mother was devastated, and I was there for her every single day, making sure she ate, making sure she had company, making sure she didn't sink into the kind of loneliness that can swallow a person whole. Olivia and Ethan, though, they were different. They started visiting more often, but not out of love or concern. At first I didn't notice it, or maybe I didn't want to see it, but there were whispers in the kitchen, late-night phone calls that stopped when I walked in, and sudden awkward silences over dinner. I kept telling myself, they're just grieving in their own way, but my gut kept nagging at me, telling me something was wrong. One evening I came home early from work to find them all in the living room, papers spread out on the coffee table, and my mother's eyes red from crying. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice tight with worry. Olivia shot me a glance that could cut glass, and Ethan quickly slid a folder under a stack of envelopes. My mother wouldn't meet my gaze, and that's when Olivia said it, in that cold, matter-of-fact tone I'd never heard from her before. "Daniel, we've decided it's best if you sign over your share of the inheritance and the house to Mom and me. It's what Dad would have wanted." My heart sank, the room seemed to tilt around me, and I just stood there, stunned. "Dad would have wanted," I repeated, my voice shaking. "Dad wanted fairness, not manipulation," I finally managed to say. But they just looked at me like I was the selfish one. In the weeks that followed, they pressured me relentlessly, calling me names, accusing me of not caring about Mom, telling me I was making things harder for everyone. Every message, every conversation, felt like another brick in a wall they were building between me and my own family. The final straw came on my mother's birthday, when they held a small gathering at the house. I wasn't invited. I found out about it through photos posted online. Smiling faces around the dining table, my place at the head of the table taken by Ethan, as if I'd never existed. I sat in my apartment that night, scrolling through the pictures, feeling like my chest was being crushed. These were the people I'd defended, supported, and loved without question, and they had erased me from the picture entirely. That's when something inside me shifted. The pain began to harden into something sharper, colder, and far more dangerous. I realized that I couldn't change what they'd done, but I could make sure they'd regret underestimating me. I didn't want an explosive confrontation, no shouting matches or public scenes. I wanted something slow, deliberate, and unforgettable. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan that would take time, patience, and a little bit of help from people they didn't even know I had in my corner. I started by gathering information, digging into every corner of the family's finances, property records, and even Ethan's business dealings. He liked to present himself as a successful entrepreneur, but I knew he had skeletons in his closet, and I intended to find every last one. At the same time, I reconnected with old friends from our town, people who had heard the rumors but never knew the truth. I let small details slip, just enough to spark curiosity, but not enough to give away my entire plan. The whispers began to spread, not unlike the ones Olivia and Ethan once used against me. The beauty of revenge, I realized, isn't in how loud it is, but in how quietly it grows, until it's too late to stop it. I didn't know exactly how long it would take, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just going to make them feel the pain they'd given me. I was going to make them wish they'd never thought I was weak. And as I stared at the last photo of them together in that house, laughing without me, I whispered to myself, "This isn't over. Not even close." I woke up the next morning, my pillow still damp from the tears I cried last night, and my heart felt heavy. like someone had placed a stone inside my chest, pressing down with every breath, making it hard to even move, let alone think clearly. The sunlight slipped through the curtains, but instead of warming me, it felt cold, almost mocking, as if the world outside was carrying on happily, while my own world had been shattered into pieces. And the worst part was, the people who did this to me were the same people I once trusted more than anyone else. I dragged myself to the kitchen, my bare feet brushing against the cold tiles, and every sound in the quiet apartment seemed to echo too loud. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, all of it seemed like reminders that time was moving forward. But I was still stuck in that moment of betrayal, replaying it over and over. I poured myself a cup of coffee, though I didn't really want it, but I needed something to hold, something to keep my hands from shaking, because every time I thought of their faces, their fake smiles, their rehearsed apologies, my fingers curled into fists without me even realizing. And then, my phone buzzed, a new notification lighting up the screen. It was from my cousin, one of the few family members who had always been on my side, someone who never sugarcoated things, and she sent me a message that made my stomach drop instantly. "You need to see this," she wrote, attaching a video link. My heart pounded as I tapped it open, the screen loading slowly like it knew I wasn't ready, but then there it was, them, sitting around the same table where I had once celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays with them, except now they were laughing, telling the story of what happened, like it was some kind of joke, like my pain was nothing but entertainment for them. My breath caught in my throat, and my hands trembled so badly that I almost dropped the phone. Every word they said was another knife twisting deeper into my chest. They spoke about me as if I wasn't human, as if my feelings didn't matter. They called me dramatic. They said I'd get over it soon. And worst of all, they claimed that I had brought it all on myself. I sat there frozen for a moment, but then something inside me shifted. Something I hadn't felt in a long time, strength, not the gentle kind that forgives, but the kind forged in fire, the kind that takes pain and shapes it into a weapon. If they thought I would just disappear quietly, they were wrong. Over the next few days I kept my distance, saying nothing, because I knew silence was my greatest weapon for now. I started digging, not for dirt in the petty sense, but for truth, the kind of truth that could strip away the masks they wore so well. I remembered every conversation we'd ever had, every offhand comment they made when they thought I wasn't listening, and I started connecting dots that I hadn't noticed before. Money, that's what it all came down to. There had been talk of an inheritance, property that had been in the family for generations, and suddenly it made sense why they had been so quick to push me out. They didn't just betray me emotionally, they had a motive, and that motive was greed. Once I realized this, I began keeping records, saving screenshots, old emails, and even voice recordings from past calls that I had saved without thinking much about it at the time. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became, and the angrier I got. But it was no longer the kind of anger that made me cry in bed. This was the kind that made me stand taller. I started planning, not impulsively, but with patience, the way you'd prepare for a storm, knowing exactly when to strike so the damage would be impossible to undo. I reached out to a lawyer, someone discreet, and explained everything, every detail, every proof I had gathered, and as I spoke, I saw the expression on his face change from polite listening to genuine shock. He told me I had more than enough to take legal action, and even though I wasn't sure if that was the path I'd choose, it felt good to know I had that power. In the meantime, I began planting seeds. Little truths slipped into conversations with people they still trusted, making sure the right ears heard them, so that by the time the full truth came out, it wouldn't be a shock. It would be confirmation of what they had started to suspect. And then came the day I ran into them unexpectedly, in the local market. Their laughter died the moment they saw me. Their smiles faltered, and I could almost hear the unspoken question in their minds. What does she know? I just smiled back, not a warm smile, but the kind that says, I see you, I know you, and your time is coming. And without saying another word, I walked away, leaving them standing there in their own silence. They had no idea that every step I took away from them was another step closer to their downfall. The plan had been simmering for weeks now, and every day that passed, I felt my resolve harden like stone. They thought I was the same quiet girl who would swallow her pain, and let them walk away with the victory. But they had no idea that the silence they mistook for weakness was the sound of something dangerous growing. I started small. The first step in my revenge was not to attack directly, but to make them comfortable. I wanted them to believe the storm had passed, that my wounds had healed. I began sending polite messages in the family group chat again, commenting on their posts, even liking their photos as if nothing had happened. And just as I expected, their guard started to lower. Meanwhile, I was building connections. I reached out to old family friends, mutual acquaintances, and even distant relatives who had always liked me more than them. I told them half-truths, just enough to spark curiosity without revealing the whole story. When people hear just a little, they fill in the rest with their imagination, and often, the imagined is far worse than the truth. Next came the research. I went through every old family album, every message, every video clip I could find. I gathered dates, events, and receipts, not the kind you get from a store, but the kind that ruin reputations. I remembered birthdays they had missed, lies they had told, promises they had broken. I kept a careful timeline, weaving it into a narrative that painted them exactly as they were, selfish, cruel, and manipulative. And then came the most satisfying part. I started to write, not a dry list of facts, but a story so emotional, so raw, that anyone reading it would feel every sting I had endured. Every word was a blade, sharpened by truth, dripping with the quiet rage I had carried for so long. When I read it back to myself, I didn't hear my own voice anymore. I heard the voice of every person they had ever hurt. This wasn't just my revenge. It was justice for years of their cruelty. The launch of my plan came sooner than I expected. The perfect opportunity presented itself in the form of their own arrogance. They were hosting a large anniversary celebration, inviting friends, colleagues, and even local influencers to flaunt their perfect life. That was where I would strike. I RSVP'd with a sweet message, pretending I was excited to attend. They believed me completely. They even posted a photo of my gracious response online, as if my presence proved we had reconciled. But behind the scenes, I was preparing something they couldn't have imagined in their worst nightmares. 2 nights before the party, I leaked the first part of my story anonymously. It was just enough to stir whispers, details vague enough to protect my identity, but sharp enough to point fingers. Within hours, people were talking. By the next morning, I saw it had been shared dozens of times, and I hadn't even released the best part yet. The night of the party arrived, and I dressed carefully. Not flashy, but elegant enough to turn heads. I wanted to look like the picture of calm confidence. When I walked in, I saw their eyes widen ever so slightly. They were surprised I had actually come. Perfect. All evening, I smiled and mingled, letting them believe I was there to celebrate. But halfway through the night, just as they took the microphone to thank their guests, my phone buzzed. It was the alert I had been waiting for. Part 2 of my story had just gone live. This time I named names. I provided dates. I attached photographs that contradicted years of their lies. And I didn't just send it into the void. I sent it directly to the inbox of every major person in their circle. Colleagues, friends, business partners. None were spared from the truth. I watched it happen in real time. First came the whispering in the corners of the room. Then the sideways glances. One by one, their smiles began to falter. The microphone slipped slightly in their hand. And when their phone buzzed with dozens of notifications at once, I knew the truth had landed. They tried to continue their speech, but their voice trembled. People began excusing themselves from the tables, stepping outside to make phone calls. One of their closest friends wouldn't even look at them. That was when they saw me, standing at the back of the room, my expression calm but unreadable. Our eyes locked for just a moment. They knew. Oh, they knew. I didn't need to stay for the rest of the disaster. I walked out before dessert was served, leaving them to drown in the wreckage of their own making. Outside, the cool night air felt like freedom. For the first time in years, my chest felt light. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. I had one final move to make. A twist they wouldn't see coming until it was far too late. The night I had been waiting for finally arrived. It was the evening of their engagement party, and every detail had been carefully planned. Not by them, but by me. The invitations had gone out to every friend, every family member, every person in their polished social circle. They thought it was going to be a night of love and celebration. But for me, it was the night I'd finally watched their perfect little world crumble. I arrived early, wearing a dress so stunning, it made heads turn the second I walked in. It wasn't vanity, it was strategy. I wanted her to feel small the moment she saw me. The venue was dripping with luxury. Chandeliers, gold-trimmed tableware, crystal glasses that caught the light like frozen diamonds. Soft jazz music floated through the air. But beneath it all, my pulse was pounding. When I saw them together, my stomach tightened. They looked like the picture-perfect couple, smiling for the cameras. But I knew the truth. And so did the USB drive in my purse. Inside it was every screenshot, every recording, every receipt. Months of evidence of their lies, their schemes, their betrayal. The party was in full swing when I slipped away to the sound booth. The technician barely noticed me as I leaned over, my voice dripping with authority. "Play this when I give the signal, I whispered, sliding the USB across the table. He hesitated for a moment, but the envelope I handed him was enough to silence his questions. I walked back into the main room, my heels clicking against the polished floor like the countdown of a clock. I took a glass of champagne and made my way to the stage. The microphone felt cold in my hand, but my voice was steady. "Good evening, everyone. I began. I know we're here to celebrate love, but before we raise our glasses, I think it's important we know exactly what we're toasting to, The crowd chuckled, thinking I was about to tell a sweet story. I gave the signal, and the screens around the room lit up. The music stopped, replaced by the sound of her voice, whispering in the dark. "He'll never find out, we'll make sure of it, Gasps filled the air, as image after image appeared. Stolen money transfers, late-night hotel check-ins, text messages dripping with deceit. I didn't look at them while it played. I looked at the faces in the room. Her parents' shocked expressions. His friends shaking their heads. The betrayal was no longer mine to carry. It was theirs to own, in front of everyone who mattered to them. When the last image faded, the silence was deafening. Then came the whispers, the murmurs, the stares. He tried to speak, but no words came out. She reached for him, but he pulled away. The ring on her finger suddenly looked like a shackle. I stepped down from the stage, my heart calm, my steps slow. She ran after me, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this?" She cried. I turned to her, my eyes steady. "Because you took everything from me, and thought I'd just walk away. I said softly. "But now, everyone knows who you really are, I left the venue without looking back. Outside, the air was cool, the city lights glowing like distant stars. For the first time in months, I felt free. The weight on my chest was gone, replaced with something new, power. In the weeks that followed, their lives unraveled. Her family cut her off. His business partners backed away. The engagement was called off. And the whispers followed them everywhere. No amount of makeup or fake smiles could hide the truth now. They had built their lives on lies. And I had set fire to the foundation. And me, I rebuilt. Not with anger, but with strength. I moved to a new apartment, started a new job, and surrounded myself with people who knew my worth. Every now and then, I'd get messages from mutual friends telling me how badly they were doing. I didn't respond, I didn't gloat. Revenge wasn't about destroying them completely. It was about taking back my voice, my power. But there was one thing I kept. The dress I wore that night. A reminder that even in the moments when they thought they had broken me, I stood tall. And I won. Not because they suffered, but because I healed. And that is the sweetest revenge of all.